Good. Well, let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'd like to thank you for joining us and thank our panelists for participating in today's discussion about community colleges and the future of work. I'm David Lesher, the editor of CalMatters. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, statewide news organization with a mission to raise public awareness about the major issues facing California. This event is part of a series this year that we are happy to co-host with the Milken Institute California Center about the future of work, perhaps our greatest challenge in California. Our reporters spread throughout the state have spent months exploring the rapid changes in industry and the growing mismatch between wages and costs in a state with the nation's highest rates for poverty and income inequality. More recently, the future of work is also about a pandemic-caused recession that has seen more than 5 million unemployment claims processed in just the past 2 months in California. And now, with the recent expressions of pain and anger and concern, the future of work is also seen through the lens of injustice and racial bias. We are committed to being a trusted source of information about all these issues, helping to inform state and community leaders about real lives in California, and to raise awareness about the policy debates and discussions around these important issues. I encourage you to follow us at calmatters.org, to subscribe to our daily newsletter, and to help support this free source of quality information by making a donation. Now I'm very happy to introduce Matt Horton, our co-host and the director of the Milken Institute's California Center.
Thanks, Dave. Really happy to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us. As Dave said, I'm a director at the Milken Institute's California Center, and we're also a nonprofit, nonpartisan, but instead of a news outlet, we're an economic policy think tank. We're excited to be partnering with CalMatters to bring you this series of conversations, which aims to explore regional and state responses and recovery strategies that focus on resiliency around the future of work, especially accelerated with the response and recovery to COVID-19 and a post-COVID-19 landscape. With workers in California and across America losing their jobs at record-setting numbers, we think the key to maintaining the state's economic success lies in cultivating a more robust and inclusive 21st century workforce that facilitates equal access to education and employment opportunities. Enhancing these access points by providing targeted education and training programs through strengthened public and private partnerships, we think will promote equitable and inclusive growth that supports more diversity and engages employers around critical workforce needs and gaps. As Dave mentioned in this Future of Work series, we're bringing together state and local leaders in education, business, policy, philanthropy to discuss what is needed in ways of system improvements and what strategies are essential to repairing and identifying existing gaps in order to bridge access and scale effective workforce development programs. And with that, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Michael Zimstein, the higher education reporter for CalMatters. Thank you, Michael, and take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you all for taking the time to be a part of this conversation. We have a great panel of exceptional state leaders today to talk with us about the intersection of community colleges and the workforce, exploring how California's system of 115 colleges, which in total educate more than 2 million students, prepare those students for careers. Joining us are Lance Hastings, president of California Manufacturing and Technology Association, State Senator Connie M. Leyva, representing the 20th District, including Chino, Ontario, and Pomona. She chairs the Senate Education Committee, and previously she was president of the California Labor Federation. Eloy Ortiz-Oakley, chancellor of the California Community Colleges, and Omar Rashad, CalMatters reporting fellow and editor of El Camino College Union newspaper in Torrance. A programming note: I will be asking questions for the first 30 to 40 minutes, after which we'll take questions from the audience. To submit a question, please type in what you want to learn from our speakers into the chat feature at the bottom right corner of your screen, and submit your question by clicking on CalMatters host as the recipient, and we'll get to as many of your queries as we can. And now for the first question. What is the role of the community college system in preparing students for the future, and how does that role respond to the enormous challenges we face today with the recession, as we've seen recently, broad concerns about inequality and injustice? Let's start with Chancellor Oakley, and as a kind reminder, please mute yourselves if you're not speaking. Chancellor Oakley.
All right, well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, CalMatters, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today, and certainly thank you to the Milken Institute and Matt. So that's a big question, and it's something that we have been challenged with for quite some time. The fortunate news is that the California community colleges, like most community colleges across the nation, are built and designed to be the most flexible and adaptable system of higher education in all of higher education. We have the great privilege of accepting the top 100% of students. So, you know, we are the most selective college system in the country. We select everyone because we really believe that everyone who comes to our doors brings an enormous amount of talent. And they just need our help to get themselves in a place where they can contribute to their families, contribute to the workforce, and have a chance for the opportunity that our state promotes that everyone has access to. So the challenge, though, is that even being the most adaptable system, we are falling behind given the weight of the structures of higher education, given that there is finite resources in the state budget, and we're already serving over 2 million students. So when we have crises like the ones we're experiencing, and you know, even I can't say I've been in a crisis like this when you have everything coming at you at one time. But think about it. The reason we're in crisis, the reason that we have COVID-19 affecting the most under-resourced communities, and particularly communities of color, the reason that we have civil unrest, and it's particularly acute in communities of color, and especially Black and African-American communities, the reason that this economic crisis now is impacting the most under-resourced communities is because they have lack of access to quality higher education. And this new economy that is already being created, I mean, the future is here. We're not waiting. I mean, we have been thrust into the future, and even with the magic that our colleges create, we're still not able to keep up and give everyone the opportunity that they deserve to be able to get a foothold in the economy. So it is a huge challenge. We've got a lot of work that we need to do. We need to rethink how we deliver teaching and learning to students, meeting them where they're at, particularly in an environment of physical distancing. We have to leverage technology more, and we have to leverage the latest in learning science to be able to give more people opportunity throughout our communities in California.
Thank you, Chancellor. And now, Senator Leyva, same question. What is the role of the community college system in preparing students for the future? And how does that role respond to the enormous challenges we face today?
Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I do subscribe to CalMatters, read it every morning, and I think it's excellent. I get the little tidbits that I need, so thank you, and I would recommend it for everyone. Before I completely answer the question, when I was the president of the California Labor Federation for 10 years, we were obviously focused on good jobs. That is the reason I ran for office, is because I used to say a good job fixes a lot of what ails us. Now I say a good job fixes everything that ails us. And we continue to fall behind when people don't have access to those good jobs. And I think Chancellor Oakley and I are on the same page. My first thing I would say about community colleges is that they are nimble and that they are flexible, and that they are the ones that go into the community and they make sure that they have programs for that are for each region, that are adaptable for each region, so that of the 115 community colleges, they all offer different certificates and pathways. 15 of them actually offer bachelor's degrees now. Everything from avionics, which is in San Bernardino Valley College in my district, to equine and ranch management, which is at the Feather River College. So community colleges have the ability to dig into the communities that they represent and meet with management, meet with industry, and be flexible in changing what kind of jobs are out there and what kind of jobs are needed. I think about the future going forward, and we are going to need people who can go into the communities and find out if you had COVID or not, so that we can do contact tracing. That might be something that the community colleges can work on. That might be something that the community colleges would be perfectly suited for. So I think that we have to continue to, well, I'm just a huge fan of community colleges because they are affordable. They are, as Chancellor Oakley said, they accept everyone. So that if you want to go back to school, if you want to start there, our community colleges are there. And I really see them as the future going forward. Not that they haven't been a big part, but they've moved everything to online and have done that very quickly. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that, so I won't get too into that. But our community colleges continue to be, and should continue to be, the center of all of our communities, because that's where people can go and be accepted and get a degree, get a certificate, and go out and get a good job to pay their bills and be a productive member of society.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Hastings, slightly different question. What do employers expect or need from community colleges? And likewise, how are those needs shaped by the recession, as well as the growing attention on inequity and injustice?
Thank you very much, Michael. And again, CalMatters and Milken Institute, fantastic forum. Really appreciate the opportunity to get some views out into the public so we can have this discourse, which I think is very critical at this particular stage. Perhaps I'll answer the question kind of in reverse. I think the community colleges are in fact a catalyst for those to get into the workforce in an area, particularly us in the manufacturing sector, where the average wage in manufacturing is north of $85,000 a year. And you can attain that kind of occupation with a skill set, in many cases earned and learned at the community colleges. And the colleges provide a bridge really to perhaps a student who's leaving high school not exactly sure what they want to do. And on the other side of that equation, a tremendous amount of pressure to go to a four-year university. Society is pressuring, in some cases families may be pressuring, but that isn't always the right fit for a student. And the community college really does provide that bridge, because it does add to a skill level, adds to the educational experience of a student that could come into a sector, and they do provide the occupational training necessary to come into the manufacturing world. When I took on this role a year and a half ago, the biggest issue that our members were coming to me with is the skilled workforce of the future is not there yet. We need to identify them. We need to train them and make sure that they're ready. In addition to what's loosely called the blue tsunami of retirements that are pending, the gray tsunami, happening in the next couple of years. We will need millions of manufacturing workers to take on these roles. And they're not the dirty, dark, and dangerous roles that they perhaps once were. The manufacturing environment now is clean and safe as it ever has been, and can only get better. So I'm real happy to be able to participate with the community colleges, because for us in our sector, it is a tremendous bridge. We partner with here locally in Sacramento, the Los Rios Community College District, with some grants, hugely successful. We're working down in the Los Angeles area now with the other colleges in that region, just to make sure that we have a trained workforce. And it's not just to fill spots. For us, it's to fill good, paying, safe, and jobs that people can have for years and grow and expand within the role by just having a set of skill sets that are necessary and required in our sector.
Thank you for that. Next question is for Mr. Rashad. And this one is going to focus on the community college you attend, El Camino College in Torrance, where you're the school papers editor. What's your sense of how the community college is preparing your fellow students for the workforce? And what help do you think students need to deal with the issues that we are discussing?
Totally, yeah. Thanks, Michael. As a student reporter on my campus, I absolutely love, any opportunity to really talk about, issues and topics that are impacting students, especially, in community college. I feel like, it can really have an impact on people's futures. When we talk about coronavirus, obviously the biggest thing when it comes to education is when classes moved online. And so when we're looking at, careers and courses in career technical education, one big question that comes up is, how do you still give students the training, the hands-on training that you see in a lot of these careers, like automotive technology and nursing. And so I think that's one big hurdle that I think some students are thinking of. And I think overall, many community colleges across the state have been very vital to, satisfying workforce needs. And I think going forward, it's the question of, how do you still, give the training to students, given this whole volatile situation with coronavirus and sort of its impacts on how education goes, forward, and how education is provided for students. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question, sorry. When we say community colleges are a pipeline to the workforce, what jobs and wages are we talking about? Are they jobs that pay a livable wage? Mr. Hastings, let's start with you, and then we'll have Senator Leyva answer next.
Thank you very much. I kind of alluded to that earlier in the opening comments that I made, but indeed they are. And that's where you can get a 2-year Associates of Arts degree and come into the sector with a skill set. It could be electrical engineering. It could have been something that's foundational to allow folks to come into the manufacturing sector. But one of the challenges that we have in that space is the narrative about manufacturing. And I alluded to it a moment ago, the dirty, dark, and dangerous. We open up our doors in the manufacturing sector every October. There's Manufacturing Day, where families are able to come in and look at a manufacturing facility and see what it's like. And there was a situation of a manufacturer in Oakland, California, where it was overheard a parent leaning into a child whose eyes were just wide open with the wonder of it all, of things being made. And the parent actually leaned in and said, "You don't want to work here." And it's that kind of narrative that we have to overcome, because as soon as, and this is a younger, elementary school age student, once that's planted, you've almost lost that future potential employee. And we're trying to demonstrate by going out into the community and showing what our industry has to offer. And those are the good paying jobs that can afford to buy homes in this very expensive state, take families on vacation, and otherwise have a much more than livable wage. And that is the offer and promise that the manufacturing sector represents. And it's our responsibility as trade association leaders to help change that narrative so that everyone has that opportunity in our sector. And it's not exclusive to anyone. If you have a skill and you want to apply it, the manufacturing sector is for you. And as a result, you'll be rewarded well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the manufacturing sector is a place where students can enter the workforce and continue developing and growing into the profession?
Absolutely. In fact, even at 18, you can start growing. If you do some quick math, if you come in at maybe not the median, but close to the median average, you would have earned $300,000 while your counterpart who went to the 4-year university was still studying. So you're ahead of the game from the get-go, and you do allow yourself to move up either within a company or a trade or around and across. And that's the opportunity you have when you have that skill that are in many cases so greatly in demand, whether it be welding, electrical, plumbing, those kinds of things are exceedingly valuable skills. And unfortunately, society in many cases underrates those.
And is that training the responsibility of manufacturers or the community college or both?
It's a partnership. It's all about we, it's not about us and them. And when we work together, for example, that Los Rios project for us is an apprentice program, is fantastic. And when we come together and work on a common purpose, we've just had huge success with that. So it doesn't fall on any one sector. I think it falls on all of us.
Okay. Senator Leyva.
So I first want to say that I completely agree with Mr. Hastings regarding, well, pretty much everything you said, but really the point about so many people think you need to go to a four-year institution or a four-year college and get a degree. And that's great and that's wonderful, but you don't always walk out of that college or that university with a job waiting for you. And you're right about parents too. So many times it's the parents saying, oh, you don't want to work here, or this is not what you want to do. You know, as a parent myself, my goal was to make sure that my children were happy, healthy, and gainfully employed. And part of being gainfully employed is making sure you have access to a good paying job. And the good paying job, manufacturing is great. Our trades are great. And I think that our community colleges provide that. I also agree that it's a partnership. It has to be a partnership between the community colleges and industry. I do think we need work in some places, some certificates maybe that folks are getting. And that, a lot of that has to do, I think, with the state and funding. And these are jobs in the medical field. Some of those, you know, you think of an LVN, if they don't go on to get their BSN, they don't become an RN, they're not going to make as much money, but we need to make sure that we are providing our community colleges with the money so that they can open more options or more, have more classes for students so that they can take those. And then I also think about home health care workers. And if you have to have a degree for that or a certificate for that, that's not a great paying job. But that again isn't on the community college because that would be more on the state to make sure that we are funding those in-home health care workers who do incredibly hard, wonderful, heartfelt work. So I think that most of the certificates that someone would get from a community college will lead to a good paying job. But I think there's work that we can do in a partnership with the state to make sure that, that we do a better job.
Thank you for that. Chancellor Oakley, what jobs do you envision the California community colleges preparing students for? And how does the system in its role differ from the kind of jobs that the UC and CSU are preparing students for?
So, well, I will try not to make this too complicated of an answer, but it is sort of a nuanced situation that we find ourselves in because, you know, the way we're describing it currently, we're describing the pipeline into jobs in a traditional way, K-12 to higher ed and then into the workforce. And I think that we need to continue to improve that. And, you know, the community colleges prepare students in that traditional pipeline to get into jobs that are being created or have existed. Certainly, the jobs that Mr. Hastings described, we have some great success with advanced manufacturing. But those jobs require a skill level and require a certain amount of education. And so the way we're constructed right now, we're organized right now, it takes some time to get the student interested in the field, get them through certificate or an associate's degree and get them into the workforce. Whereas CSU and UC, they're focused on bachelor's degrees and above. So these are typically jobs that require a higher education level. Whether or not it's a higher skill level, I can argue that because not every job that requires a BA requires a different skill level. And that's a whole different conversation because I do think for the future work, we need to eliminate the way that we think about degrees and credentials. That's an antiquated way of looking at things. That's not going to work in the future of work, but I'll stop there, get off my soapbox. But we also have to think about the pipeline of individuals who are not coming through our K-12 system, that are, you know, between the ages of 24 and 50, who have nothing more than a high school education, who've been in the workforce and find themselves struggling right now in particular to continue to have a foothold in the economy. And they're going to lose that foothold. There's no doubt about it. They are the most vulnerable workers in our society, and there are nearly, if not more than 8 million in California. So we have to also think about, how do we reskill? How do we upskill Californians who are not in that traditional pipeline? And that's not something we've really cracked yet. And we need to really pay close attention, because what we see in front of us is a lot of frustrated people who are unemployed or underemployed, and they're not the traditional pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the community college system has done enough work in creating this stackable credentials model, where you go in and you receive, say, an 18-unit certificate and you work for 2 years, and then you come back and upskill to receive, say, 23 more units, all the way up to an associate's degree? Do you think the system is there, or does it have a long way to go?
So I think that is the direction that our system has been working toward, a more stackable, disaggregated credentialing system. But even that is not going to keep up. I mean, if you think about it, what is the point of a credential? Point of a credential, it's a proxy to give employers information about what kind of competencies and skills that individual has. And that may or may not come from how much seat time you have in a college course, which is the way that we're organized right now. We really need to begin to leapfrog that current paradigm that you just described, and really start getting to a point where we can measure competency and be able to more quickly communicate that to hiring managers and employers. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're trying to head to. Mm-hmm. Through all this chaos. And I think that's when we will get to catch up with the future of work.
Mm-hmm. I wanna stay on this thread. Forgive me. Mr. Hastings, as president of the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, do you think that employers are more interested in a credential certificate from a college, or are they opening up to this idea of some kind of badge that tells employers this worker has mastered these skills on the job?
Yeah, it's the skills that matter. And the chancellor, I think, hit the nail on the head, that if things can be combined and stacked without having to, matriculate all the way to a certain degree, that's really what we want, because it's that skill that's needed in the workplace. And to the extent you can demonstrate that, the certification or credential validates that, it's been acknowledged and recognized by an institution, which is always helpful. But if you're applying to be a welder in a facility and you come in and you can weld better than anyone they've ever seen, nothing else really matters. You've demonstrated that you have not only the skill, but the best skill among a peer class. And that really is what matters. And that's what's so unique and refreshing about the manufacturing sector. Bring your skills to the job site, and essentially the world is your oyster if you apply that. But you have to want to apply it. And some of the most skilled folks out there either suffer from lack of confidence, that they may enjoy a particular trade, but it's just not really something that motivates them, because there's that disconnect between understanding what that skill is worth. The value of that skill in the workplace is a tremendous thing. Mm-hmm. And part of our job is flipping that narrative to make it much more attractive.
Okay. We're in a recession right now, with the exception of Mr. Rashad. You were all in positions of leadership a decade ago when we were experiencing another debilitating economic downturn, the likes we haven't seen since the Great Depression. What lessons did you learn then about what is necessary to ensure students get the classes and training that they need to get jobs and to make sure jobs exist? So Chancellor Oakley, let's start with you.
Well, you probably started with the wrong person. The last recession seems like only yesterday. I still have nightmares, but here's the challenge, and to try and put it in a nutshell. The way we're organized in the state of California, and the way community colleges are funded, is sort of the opposite of the cycles of the budget. In a deep recession like we experienced in 2008, we receive less funding at a point in time where we see increased demand. In the last recession, we saw increased demand because we had some of the largest high school graduating classes in the history of California. We saw high unemployment. These individuals were trying to get into community colleges to access courses and programs that allowed them to try and get into the workforce, because the 2008 recession also signaled a clear departure away from the traditional job. There was, if you think about it, since that depression, the gig economy has taken off. We no longer see large employers holding on to employees for their lifetime. That's all gone. So we really suffered in that recession, because when I was president of Long Beach City College, we were literally turning away tens of thousands of students at a time when they needed us the most. So, you know, we're trying to, go ahead.
I'm confused by that. If you're an open enrollment institution, how are you turning them away? Were you just,
lack of capacity.
Okay, meaning?
So the way we operate, which I know is, it's in the UC and the CSU, there's finite enrollment numbers. You admit X number of students that you're funded for, and that's it. In the California community colleges, because we're an open enrollment institution, it's a function of how many classes that you have available. So when demand exceeds the number of classes available because of our funding shortfall, we can't let any more students into our classes. So that's really how it works. It's a little different than CSU and UC that have a mechanism to close enrollment.
So they're technically enrolled, but they can't take any classes.
Yes, they can be admitted to the community college, but there's no classes to take. They're all full, and we can't open up any more classes. So that's the way it works. So, so the issue today is, you know, how are we going to respond to this crisis? And one of the things I think is necessary is, we understand that the budget's going to be cut, but we need flexibility, as much flexibility as possible. And we in the community colleges, I mean, the key word for us, and the key word for students today is resiliency. We have to be in a position of resiliency, and we have to be in a position where we have multiple ways of accessing education that allow us to continue to move forward in the economy. And we need, in my opinion, a new compact with employers. No offense to my favorite senator here, but it's very difficult to rely on the legislature and the governor's office in times of deep recession, because they have so many pulls on the budget. We need to rethink our relationship with employers so that we are much more in better position to be able to support workers. Because look, things are relative these days. What is a good job? If you have no job, any job is a good job, but you know, you see who's hiring. Okay, you see who's hiring right now. And I can't argue that those are great jobs, but it's all relative. We want our students to be in a position, and remember who our students are. They are the most under-resourced individuals in the state of California. We need them to have access to the jobs that Lance is talking about, not the jobs that are, you know, delivering to my door every day.
What partnership were you referring to, or what resources from the employer side were you referring to?
So what I'm talking about, I mean, the old compact is, you know, employers partner with community colleges, they pay their state taxes, the state of California funds the community colleges. That formula is not working. And I'm not going to point blame at anybody. We need to have a much closer compact with employers. Not that we become the employer's trainers, but we have to have a much closer relationship, both in terms of curriculum development, in terms of financing, educating the workers of the future. But also we have to have a much tighter relationship between the hiring managers and our students. We need to eliminate the middlemen that exists. We need to be able to link skills to job openings much more real time, because otherwise we continue to open ourselves up to the for-profit industry. They can do things that we're not able to do. And I think it's short-sighted on our part not to allow our colleges to be more flexible and be able to have a much closer relationship with employers.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Hastings, your turn.
Yeah, I think the fact we do have a little bit of history to inform our decisions, hopefully we will have learned from the last recession to where we are now. One highlight of the current situation, we have nearly 20% unemployment. Within the manufacturing sector, that's only 9%. And if there's an opportunity for us to herald that concept and to say that we're more resilient as a sector, and in fact more necessary, because I often say things don't make themselves, people do, and we've been able to keep the manufacturing sector moving along quite well during the recession. But it's not without that challenge, as I mentioned before, with the pending retirements. We know we can do an actuarial study and say in 5 years' time we're going to need 500,000 employees in the manufacturing sector. We know that. So how do we go about making sure that they're trained and ready and wanting, which is the key part? They have to want to come into the sector. And it is working with everyone that's on this panel, students like Omar, to make sure that we're coming up and training them properly. The chancellor making sure that what he's offering is useful for all of his students. And Senator Leva's role, even in her district, I want to highlight real quickly if I could, there's an InTech Center. It's a training center. It's a joint partnership with Chaffey College, California Steel, and others. And they formed this InTech Center that is, I will argue, the best thing since sliced bread in the manufacturing sector, because students come in because they want to. They have support and sponsorships and scholarships to get their training. And when they come out of it, they are ready to go. And they are, I think their hiring rate is more than 90% minutes spent with their training. And the reason that that program works is because it's a partnership. If Chaffey College wanted to do it all on its own, yes, there would be some success, but not complete success. If California Steel, who's located there, wanted to do it all by itself, yeah, they train a few people that could come work for them. But this is the best thing for the community, and it's something that's probably replicable, scalable, and something we ought to really look around the rest of the country. A fantastic program takes a group to make effective and successful. So with those kind of models, I think we can get through, not any kind of recession, but certainly the kind that we're seeing right now. Manufacturing, on another plug for us, we're part of the critical infrastructure of this country, and we have to keep making things, which means we've had to adapt our social distancing practices at facilities, hygiene, tools being shared among employees. We've had to adapt to all that, but we've done it. And I think largely that's why you're seeing a relatively lower unemployment experience within our sector than perhaps some others.
Okay, we're gonna jump topics a bit. We know that.
Comment on this?
Please.
May I please? This is something I'm passionate about. First, I want to say that Chancellor Oakley is 100% right. Our funding stream to our colleges, to our community colleges, I think is wrong. I've been in office for 6 years. The second year, when everyone came asking again for money for the community colleges, the CSUs, the UCs, I said, why in God's name have we not figured out a permanent funding stream for all of these universities and our community colleges? Now, community colleges are a little different because they are funded by Prop 98, but it seems that it is not working. I would argue that it's not working in good times, because how do you plan a budget when you have no idea what the state is going to give you? And we were actually doing some work on this before COVID hit, but I do also agree that we need a different compact with our not necessarily with industry as a whole, with businesses as a whole. What I learned from the last recession is that if you were well off, you were still fine after the recession. It is always the little guy. It is always the regular worker that loses their home, that loses their car, that loses their credit. Why do we not ask businesses, and I'll take this current situation, why are we not asking Amazon, the grocery industry, all of these companies that are making money hand over fist, why do we not ask them to make an investment in California and in California workers? The very least they could do is pay a living wage. $15 is not a living wage. I would even argue that $20 or $25 in the Inland Empire, which is cheaper, is not a living wage. If we really want to lift people up, we have to put more pressure on corporations to do the right thing. When we saw unionized grocery stores getting praise for giving $2 an hour more to their workers and whatnot, that to me, after negotiating those contracts for many years, told me that they are making more money than they know what to do with. I sat in negotiations with those companies where we argued over 1 penny to make sure that that those employees could have their pension. 1 penny. So if they can do a $2 or $3 an hour raise over an extended time, these companies can do this. As one of them said to me many years ago, it's not that we can't afford it, we don't want to do it. So how do we do a better job of holding these corporations accountable when it's the people that are doing the job every day and pushing the money up to them? They are the ones that get hurt. They are the ones that lose their homes, their cars, their credit, like I said. So I think there is, I don't know, is there room for a public-private partnership? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. But what we're doing now isn't working for your average, everyday working person. So I will end it with that. Thank you for letting me speak my mind.
Thank you, Senator. We know COVID-19 has forced nearly all college instruction online, and many jobs are also done remotely. Mr. Rashad, what was your experience with how courses changed due to COVID-19?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak on the fact that, when courses did go online, mid-March, that's when you saw a lot of colleges and institutions, moving courses online. It was definitely a major adjustment. I, for one, am a student who really, now I totally realize how much I appreciate, the boundaries between school and home. I go to school to learn, and then I come home to, study, obviously, to finish some work, relax, entertainment, things like that. And so, I found myself, the boundaries between both those, institutions, if you will, are completely blurred now. I'm doing lectures in my bedroom, and that's sort of like an idea or concept that, students probably did not consider a lot, prior to COVID. And, COVID has definitely put students in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think another interesting point to also mention is about, students who come from low income communities and students who come from, immigrant families as well. When you're at home more, sometimes that means more responsibilities for your family. Sometimes that means, helping your younger sibling who's in K-12 education. And so, being at home can, add to a full plate of responsibilities that you already thought was, a full plate. And so I think, being able to balance all these different, moving parts and moving pieces is totally been, challenging for me, challenging for my peers. And, it's definitely been a topic, we've covered, locally, in my school paper. And I think going forward, that's also, a concept that, students are a bit worried about, and students are still sort of like navigating. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Chancellor Oakley, what are your thoughts about the quality of the education that your community colleges are able to provide online, and how might it respond to a changing workforce?
Well, as we've been talking about, our faculty and staff were shoved into the future overnight. Some of our faculty and staff were very well prepared, offer excellent online instruction. We had already started to increase the amount of instruction. And as a matter of fact, the enrollments in online instruction were growing faster than the number of in-person instruction in our system. So we saw that trend coming, but by and large, the system was not fully online. Mm-hmm. And when this pandemic took hold, I can't say that we were fully online afterwards either, because certainly faculty that were ready and very well skilled at it did an excellent job of transitioning. A lot of faculty were not ready, and we needed to do everything we could to help them get comfortable. Many of them used remote platforms like Zoom, which is not online instruction. So let's be very clear. not all of our transition was what I would consider quality online instruction. Much of it was remote instruction, a different type of instruction than in person, but not online instruction. And then, we had organizations like Calbright who have been developing what we call competency-based education. And so that helped some faculty, look at other models that we could begin to adapt. So this initial phase, it was very bumpy. Mm-hmm. I think Omar was very kind in how he described the transition to online. I think it was very awkward for all of us in mm-hmm. higher education, but we've made that transition. We're becoming more comfortable. The quality is significantly improving, and I think we'll be in a much better position come fall to be able to more effectively engage students.
Why do you have that confidence?
Because I think I have a lot of faith in our faculty and staff. I mean, I think they have come to grips with the reality that we have to be in this environment. I think for their own safety, for the safety of our students, we have to be in a physical distancing environment, at least until a vaccine is effective. And so, at the end of the day, whether or not we came to this transition willingly or not, our faculty and staff care deeply about the academic quality that our students are facing. So they're making transitions to adapt. And I have confidence that they will continue, even in the face of dwindling resources and, of course, the challenges that many of our faculty and staff face in light of the civil unrest, which of course affects our students and our faculty and our staff directly, because they are in those communities that are being impacted.
Mr. Hastings, how is the pandemic shaping the kind of jobs sought by community college students?
Well, it's affected everyone to a certain degree. But keeping that focus on the manufacturing, the skill set, to the extent that community colleges can continue to provide that in what other form or fashion they can, please keep on doing that. Mr. Oak, we need it, quite frankly. We've done a pivot. A lot of our training, of course, is on the job training, whether apprentice or other programs that are supported like by the Employment Training Panel and others. So we're pivoting to an online training system, partnering to the extent that we can with Autodesk and others to make sure that we don't lose that training, that we don't spend, as we have the last, 12 weeks now working remotely. We can't lose that time. We have to look for ways to reinvent ourselves and reinvent the opportunity and the training. And having that at least online or remote capability could make the difference between success or not success for a particular individual. And that's why we in the manufacturing sector are committed to making sure that there's a cadence of training that can move everyone forward. And I wanted to add too, the working remotely in a crisis is far different than a planned strategic initiative to work remotely. We at CMTA, we have a team of 11, and on Friday, March 13th, we took the initiative to do a practice run, just in case we may have to work remotely. We haven't been back in the office since. That Monday, we continued working remotely as part of our daily lives. It has been challenging. Working remotely, as the chef said, isn't working. It's working differently and doing different things, and productivity ebbs and flows, but it is a new paradigm for all of us that was, as was mentioned, thrust upon us, as opposed to me saying, I think CMTA would be benefited by us working remotely. Mm-hmm. And until we kind of get that balance going and back in a non-crisis environment, we're going to struggle. We're all going to struggle. And we have to see a way through that. And it blurs the lines, as Omar was saying earlier. I care about our employees, not just when they're in the office or remotely working. I care about them when they go home, during the evening, to make sure that they're sleeping well in a safe environment, a safe community, so that when they do come back to work, they're happy, pleasant, engaged, and contributing. It's not just about work. And I'm lucky enough to serve on the Governor's Future of Work Commission. And at the very first commission hearing, after hearing a couple of hours of testimony, I made the observation that we're not talking about the future of work. We're actually talking about the future of living. Because the minute you put someone in a worker box or a spouse box or a child box at home, you've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. Humans, we spend our days doing all kinds of things, and we should be able to do those seamlessly, and blurring may not be the exact adjective I'm looking for, but we're one person. We just do different things during the day.
Just really quickly, the pandemic has led to social distancing at manufacturing sites. So given that there seems to be a cap on how many workers can be at a work site because of social distancing, will that affect hiring? How does that directly affect the students who may be graduating right now with a certificate or associate's degree in tech or in manufacturing?
Well, there's a likelihood that there may be a delay. I mean, productivity is down somewhat. So I did talk about unemployment in our sector is 9%. Our productivity is probably operating between 70 and 75% across the state. So that's not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Not ideal, but because there is this recession and J-curve reaction, it may take some time. Hopefully, and all the work and initiatives that we're undertaking will lessen that time for a manufacturing sector employee. That if it, for example, in the service sector, it may take 6 months to recover, I'm going to shoot for 3 months. And that's the promise that we make. We've adapted our practices. We are socially distancing, even though it's not easy. In many cases in manufacturing, an employee is handing off a product or a tool to another in close proximity. Every one of those employees is now wearing enhanced PPE that they may not have worn before. Because if we didn't adapt, we couldn't make that item.
Mm-hmm.
And the ingenuity and innovation of the manufacturing sector, I think, should be applauded.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a lot more of that in the near future to show how we've adapted to the challenge at hand.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Senator Leyva, I know you have to go soon, so I want to give you an opportunity to give final thoughts, final observations.
Sometimes crisis leads us to be our best selves. Sometimes when we're thrust into a situation, we have to make do. I think we've heard that from Mr. Hastings. I think we've heard that from the Chancellor. And this is an opportunity for us to recreate work in different ways. We already know that there are going to be people that may never return to their workplace, people who drove into LA every day to work in a cubicle. We've found that they can do that from home. So, but what do we do to make sure, what do we learn from this lesson that we can actually move forward and do better for workers, which is better for all of our communities and society? So I think that this is great. I hope you do more of these. I look forward to continuing to work with Chancellor Oakley and Mr. Hastings. And I thank everybody for their interest, but sometimes crisis makes us be our best selves. And I hope this is that time. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry, I do have an 11 o'clock with the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So I can stay on for a few more minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time, Senator. We're now going to move it to questions from the audience. Before we get there, I want to say thank you to the College Futures Foundation. They're a sponsor of this event series, and they are also a supporter of our college journalism network that Omar is a part of. So thank you, College Journalism Network. Now for questions from the audience. This is from Nancy. If you look at so many job listings today, many require a four-year degree, including for many entry-level positions. What can we do to overcome that bias in the corporate world? And Senator, I know you're leaving in 5 minutes. I just want to maximize your time here. Do you have thoughts on that?
You know, I think that is very interesting because even at the state capitol, we look at people and we say, oh, what kind of degree do they have before we hire them? I kind of align myself with the thoughts of Mr. Hastings that, you know what, can you do the job? And what I always say is if you have the heart and the passion and the work ethic, I can teach you everything else. But that is a problem in corporate America. If you don't have that degree or that bachelor's, sometimes they don't want you. So I don't have an answer for that, but I do think we need to work on that because do you have the skill? I know lots of people that have a four-year degree. They got their degree. Doesn't mean they have the skill. Heart, passion, work ethic. I think those are critically important. So thank you for letting me answer.
Thank you. This is for Chancellor Oakley and Mr. Hastings and Mr. Rashad. Unrest and injustice, speak more about that. Community colleges and employers our systems and structures that give way to white supremacy. So how do your systems address and mollify biases, racism, iniquities? Chancellor Oakley.
Okay, how much time do we have?
2 minutes.
So let me try and put my answer in a box if I can. Our system of higher education has a legacy of structural racism, and I don't say that to try and make anyone uncomfortable. It is just where we're at. It is a system that's been handed to us that is focused more on who we exclude, not who we include. And so everything from standardized testing to a number of systemic issues, we have systematically made it much harder for individuals of color, and specifically Black and African Americans, to get their higher education. And so we have a responsibility not to necessarily blame anyone in the system, but to blame the system. It's an indictment on the system, and it's not an indictment on faculty or staff. We also have to acknowledge that there are implicit biases that we have inherited that are in our system, in our hiring processes, and I'll just focus on our hiring processes. It is clear, I mean, we have more than 70% of our full-time faculty are white, where our student body is the complete opposite. So why is that? There are biases, implicit biases in our hiring processes. We tend to focus on hiring from institutions that we feel are elite. Those institutions that are elite are selective, and they do not select individuals of color. So this is a complicated cycle. It is a cycle that has been in existence for centuries, but we have to take responsibility ourselves, particularly at this moment in time, to honor the lives that we have lost just in the recent few months, to make a change and to admit that we have implicit biases in our system, to admit that we have structural problems, and to take the initiative to begin to dismantle them.
Thank you for that. Let's let Mr. Hastings answer that too. What is the manufacturing sector doing to address racism and bias?
I think it's something that we do every day to address. You walk onto any shop floor in California or around the country, and you will see one of the most diverse workforces present anywhere. And the thing that makes me most proud about that is the opportunity that a manufacturing job provides to any and every individual that shows up to work. I had a shop floor manager talk to us one time about 6 months ago and said, all I want is someone to show up and work. I can take it from there, but they have to show up and they have to work. And you look around, this particular shop floor manager was an exceedingly diverse workforce in Oakland, California. And those are the kinds of things that make us proud to be in this sector, that we provide that opportunity. It's not just speaking, in hyperbola or, grandiose statements that, come to manufacturing and all of your problems will be solved. I'm not here to tell you that. What I'm here to tell you is the opportunity that may not exist anywhere due to the various things occurring in our society and some of the things that the Chancellor just touched on. We can break through those, because when you're making something, you're part of a team, and it doesn't make itself, as I mentioned earlier. It requires cooperation from everyone on that shop floor to make something work. And team building and cooperation among diverse individuals that may not socialize after they leave work, but they come together every day and make things happen. And that's something that I've been proud of the manufacturing sector my whole career, certainly over the last 15 to 20 years. We have that opportunity. We just want to share it more and make it more available and obvious and acceptable to everyone that we possibly can.
Does your association keep track of the keep track of the diversity of the workforce, both workers and management? And do you have any data for us that you could share? And
Well, we work closely with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm sure we can get something. We don't have it at the moment, but some of our team members are listening in on the call. It's something that we'll be sure to be taking a look at. But I can assure you from the workforce in our sector, we over-index in those measurements, as we should. We are a refuge for those that may be considered left behind and may not have that opportunity. Bring your skill, bring yourself, show up to work and work hard, and there's a place for you in the manufacturing sector.
Thank you. And thank you to Alio Rosario, who asked that question. Next question is from Luann Bynum. How do we do a better job of closing the technology gap with our students? COVID has shown how dire it is for our students of color and those living on the edge. Chancellor Oakley.
Well, I'll take that question from my former colleague. It is amazing that we live in the state of California that prides itself on being the center of advanced technology in the world. And we have some of the poorest access to broadband throughout the state. That is an embarrassment, quite frankly. And I think we need to clearly address it. We have students throughout in K-12, in community colleges, in UC, CSU, who are struggling to access Wi-Fi as we speak. They were accustomed to leaning on Starbucks or McDonald's or Barnes and Noble to get access to Wi-Fi. All that is closed. They have no access, so they're struggling. And we're doing everything we can, partner with philanthropy to find resources within our colleges to buy portable Wi-Fi systems, to partner with other employers, but it's only a drop in the bucket. And we as a state need to make this a priority. We have to give access to the majority of Californians to broadband. It should be a utility. It's just like electricity, just like gas, just like water, because we need it to survive.
Okay, Mr. Rashad, speak to that in any way you can.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really important matter. And it's a matter that I've been able to report on. I've been also been, able to see my colleagues at my college paper report on. And when you look at access and when you look at success, those two things are very heavily related. And to what Chancellor Oakley just said, students, went to Starbucks or went to Barnes and Noble, and they stayed late there, and I think that shows a lot about the resiliency of students, and the lengths that they will go to, achieve, their desired grades in their classes. One thing that I will mention is that, I've definitely been able to see this on the local level. When I do report on access at community colleges, I do think community colleges can be a little bit better in communicating, services and programs that are available to students. And not only, communicate that, but also gauge whether students are receiving those messages and gauge whether they are being successful in getting those messages across. I think that's really important. And, when reporting about these topics, when you talk to a student and say, have you heard of XYZ program that is giving out laptops or is giving out Wi-Fi hotspots, and they tell you, wow, I totally didn't know that, and then the conversation ends up going in the direction where you actually tell them how to have access to those resources and who to contact. It really shows you a lot that sometimes there is a communication gap between, colleges and students. And I think colleges can totally, improve on that and make that a priority.
Thank you for that. This question comes from Eddie Lynn, and it is to Chancellor Oakley. If you're exceeding capacity, couldn't you hire more instructors to accommodate the demand?
Well, that would be a logical solution. But our colleges are funded, and that funding dictates the capacity. 85 to 95% of the apportionment we receive goes directly to instruction, goes directly to salary and benefits. Our capacity is our faculty and staff. It's not physical capacity. We have plenty of physical capacity. What we lack is human capital capacity, and that is a direct function of the funding that we receive. So the answer to the question is, in the current budget environment, in the way that we're budgeted, no. It is unrealistic for a college to hire more faculty right now because that is an ongoing expense. We make a commitment to a faculty member for 30, 35 years. And if the funding is not going to be there to support that faculty member, then the last thing we want to do is to begin that commitment and then have to lay off staff. So that's how, unfortunately, it works right now.
This is for Mr. Hastings. Let me reach the question. Are you, and this is a question from John Pimentel, I'll try to shorten it. Are you encouraging employers, and maybe employers are already doing this, but just speak to the scale of actively recruiting students on community college campuses, going to them rather than having the students come to you or to a middleman? Are there any initiatives underway, anything you can speak of to get more of the big manufacturing and tech employers to visit community colleges?
I believe we're doing a lot of that right now, and I mentioned that in tech centers, that partnership down south, while isolated, is a good example. If there are some gaps, perhaps we can work more closely with the chancellor's office to make sure that there is that presence on the community colleges. If anything, it helps us change our narrative, as I mentioned, that we need to do. And if we have manufacturers show up at a community college for a career fair or what are the programs that you offer, I think that helps us make that pivot, because then it'll show that there is in fact a career available to you, even if you don't finish that 2-year program. You finish that one key part of the equation and the skill set, that there's an opportunity for you in the manufacturing sector. And that's something that we'd like to do, and let's pursue that. And I'm glad the question was asked, and we have some work to do in that area.
And this is for both you and Chancellor Oakley, a follow-up to that question. Where does the employer's responsibility stop? Should an employer be teaching courses on campus, or should they, or is that the domain of community college instructors? Where does the company's influence on what gets taught stop?
Yeah, I mean, that's where some of the lines get blurred, and I say that appropriately. We can go to the community college system and say, this is the macro skill set we're looking for across the board. And if that fits into the curriculum, fantastic, problem solved. But in many cases, it doesn't. And we have professionals that are willing to help, but our responsibility is, once that employee shows up, to make sure that they're continually trained every day of their career. It's not like you come in, I keep using the welding example, you come in as a welder and you're going to leave a welder. No, you're a great welder, but you're also great in something else. And we're continually trying to grow our talent so that they can progress and move upward in the chain. And if additional training, I've heard of many cases where manufacturing employees, even they've been there 20 years, they go out and get some other credential, some other certificate that they can bring back to the employer. So it's a continual process, and it doesn't end at the community college, and it doesn't begin on the manufacturing shop floor. It happens all the time throughout those processes.
Chancellor Oakley?
Yeah, if I can just add, particularly when it comes to career education, which I will separate for just a moment to our general education, we rely heavily on employers for the talent that we need to be able to teach, in our courses. We need that relevant experience from manufacturers to be able to spend time with our students, if not directly as instructors, but certainly as opportunities to intern in, to do work study in, to give them that practical support that they need in order to master the skills that they're going to need to move over. I do want to, however, highlight that this is not a one shot and you're done situation. we want to ensure that our students are resilient. In order to be resilient, they need other skills. They need skills on how to socialize. They need skills on how to write, on how to communicate, because these are the skills that make them resilient. And those are skills that are taught in the humanities. So we need to marry both. That's our job, is to ensure that our students are resilient. It is the employer's job in partnership with us to ensure that they have the skills that they need to be employed.
Mm-hmm. Earlier, you talked about flexibilities, and in the governor's proposed budget, there was some lines about being able to approve courses faster, approve courses quicker that align with workforce demand. Practically speaking, what does that mean? And Mr. Hastings, so that first part was for Chancellor Oakley. Mr. Hastings, is that something that industry wants? So Chancellor Oakley?
Sure. So flexibility to us means, first of all, without getting into the details of how we're budgeted, we have numerous funding sources, some with very tight restrictions. It's important that we loosen those up as much as possible, particularly now in a crisis, to allow our college presidents to use those resources to adapt to the needs of their community. So that's one. Two, we need more flexibility in the type of teaching and learning that we deploy. Competency-based education is a type of teaching and learning that focuses on competency acquisition, not seat time acquisition. That would allow us to be more flexible in terms of how we deal with recently unemployed or underemployed individuals who need to get into the workforce now, not 3-4 semesters from now. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of flexibility that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Hastings.
And I think that flexibility and adaptability, they feed off one another. You can't have one without the other. And this crisis has certainly demonstrated that. And that's why we have one of the strongest partnerships with one of the state agencies, the Employment Training Panel, that is primarily situated to help in a partnership format manufacturers and other employers to train individuals primarily on the job. But we've developed a COVID-19 response training program, recognizing that right now the California economy is under extreme pressure, and the opportunity to continue training individuals is paramount. It's one of the old adages that when the economy gets hit, everyone cuts the marketing budget or cuts the training budget. You can't do that. Those are the things that actually get you back out of a recession. And I applaud the Employment Training Panel and its staff to recognize that. We have a great working relationship with them. But as we're starting to reemploy and hire again, there may be some flexible requirements that we request that help us do that. Not to do away with all of the regulations that apply to the employer community at the moment, but we're in dire straits, and having that flexibility allows us to adapt and allows us to continue to be an economic engine for the state. And again, it is a partnership in order for us to be able to accomplish that. And we are, in fact, all in this together, and we all have a responsibility to work with each other to find that magic spot that works for everyone, rather than me telling the chancellor, here's exactly what you need to do, and vice versa. Put together. And I'll circle back to what I started with. The community college system is a catalyst for bright, prosperous futures, not only for all of its students, but for those students that take their skills that they've developed and the education they've developed and apply it into the manufacturing sector. That I can tell you, because we do have some control over that because we have such good paying jobs within our sector. Along say we have to work together.
Okay. Let's make this the last question. Patrick Jones describes one liberal arts college in Maine making a commitment to all 300 of its graduates that they will have jobs at graduation. Do you two envision a similar commitment in actually guaranteeing employment upon graduation?
Well, if I only had 300 students to graduate and I charged them around $60,000 a year, I could probably make that commitment. But beyond that, we make a commitment that we're going to do everything we can to support every single one of our 2.1 million students, give them the skills they need to get into a job, and we're going to work our butts off to connect with employers. And we ask our employers to do everything they can to help make that connection. But yes, I mean, I don't mean to be too flippant, but it is a very different situation. We are the least funded system of higher education in the country versus a private liberal arts college.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Hastings,
I mentioned that the Intech Center and that high 90s percent in terms of its graduation to go right into the workforce, because the program there matches up the need. It's not like, well, we're going to train you as an electrical engineer, and there are no electrical engineer jobs available. They know what's out there in terms of the job requirement. They train accordingly. So that's where you increase your odds of success when you're meeting the needs of both the employer and the individual student who wants to come into the sector. It's hard to scale that, completely, because California has its various regions with different needs, but it's a start, and it's something that we can model and work and make effective. It's difficult to make a guarantee, as you can imagine, for anything. The best you can do is to increase the odds of success. And by working together and having programs that are proven and effective, that's where you have that success, where you hover in that 90% range of guaranteed employment after the fact. Mm-hmm. People are going to want to come into that program because this is the program that's going to get me a job. And we had 2 testimonials from some graduates at the Tech Center that came in and said, I was going nowhere. I was in and out of trouble with the law. I went through this program. I started a job at $24 an hour, and now I'm making $35 an hour.
Mm-hmm. And you think
a success story?
You think every community college? You think every community college can have that kind of partnership with multiple companies?
It's worth pursuing. I mean, it works. That's the nice thing. We have something that works, mm-hmm. and it works well.
Okay, well, those were the questions. I want to thank all the panelists for joining this webinar. I learned a lot. And I want to ask my colleagues, Dave or Vanessa, if there's anything else that I'm overlooking as we wrap this webinar. I'm not hearing anything, so let's, again, thank you everyone. Thank you for listening in, asking your questions. If you joined us later in the conversation or would like to watch this discussion again, we will be sending you an email with a link to the recording. Again, big thanks to the College Futures Foundation, big thanks to Milken, and to the audience listening and watching, head over to www.calmatters.org to read the latest thoughtful journalism about California politics and policy. To all, thank you very much. Have a good one.